Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia, and I am a project manager here at the UN Global Compact Network UK. This is our first in a series of webinars called the SDG and Innovation, and we will be having a number of different companies who will be coming to share around what they're doing in regards to innovation and SDGs. And so the first of the series, we have Mott MacDonald, and coming to share with us today is Hiba Khan. So yeah, Hiba, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. So I'm talking today about SDGs and innovation, which links quite nicely into SDG 9 there, and specifically about the Sustainable Development Goal dashboard or tracker that we developed. And you can see it just really small in the iPad there. But I will just go through first. So I'm going to introduce the SDGs. So I'm sure everyone knows them in a lot of detail, and a bit about Mott MacDonald and why we developed the tracker and sort of the context and what we hope to achieve, as well as the challenges. And then talk about some of the questions that we came across when we were developing the tracker, which I thought were particularly interesting. Doing a demonstration and showing some of the functionality of the tracker and some of my favourite bits. And the Mott MacDonald Innovation Framework, which is quite interesting if you haven't seen it, as a way of guiding innovation through the different stages and avoiding some of those common pitfalls. And then just talking at the end about where we want to go from here. So starting with the Sustainable Development Goals, as I said, I think most people know them very well. But they were brought in 2015. So I think in 2020 now, we're exactly a third of the way through the implementation because they're meant to be achieved by 2030. And what was interesting, if anyone else dialed into the webinar yesterday on the Action Manager, is they said that not one country in the whole world is actually on target to achieve these SDGs. So we definitely need a new way of thinking, and these kind of disruptive technologies, and companies like mine and other companies, I think, are in a really unique position to be able to sort of challenge the SDGs, work with the SDGs, and use the SDGs in what we do. So who is Mott MacDonald? So this kind of big series of circles shows just the range of different projects that we work in as Mott MacDonald. We're working in 150 countries, and we're this global engineering, management and development consultancy. And it is a huge scale. It's huge projects. Me personally, I'm on the bottom left there, and my colleague Chris Preston. So we've been developing this tracker, and we sit in the international development team, which is circled down in the bottom right. And then for the tracker, to make sure it's as digital and innovative as possible, we've been working with our digital infrastructure team, which is that yellow dot circled sort of in the middle on the left. A bit more about our projects in the context. So, I mean, this is just international development, but there's just across so many different spheres and sectors. So, we work in health, we've got education, we work in climate change. I personally work in water. I'm on a huge flood defense project in Bangladesh on rivers that are sort of 12 kilometers wide, funded by the Asian Development Bank. So our projects really do contribute towards sustainability and the SDGs, and I think there's no question about that. But the challenge and why we needed or wanted a tracker like this is that we didn't have a universal way of measuring all of our projects. So it's great that we have such a wide variety, but that means that it's very easy for one client half the world away to be talking in a completely different language of sustainability. And there's so many out there, so these are just a few. But it's very easy for someone to say, well, I'm interested in SDG 15 life on land, while a completely different client is talking about the ecological ceiling. And that doesn't really help decision makers to make those strategic level decisions. We can't really measure our projects against each other. So the SDGs then and this tracker sort of sat in a perfect place right in the middle to be able to link our projects together. So as much as it's a challenge to talk in the same sustainability language, it's also a great opportunity to link all of these projects, wide-ranging sectors, clients, spheres, countries together in that uniform, universal language. And then the reason the SDGs are so perfect is because they're broad enough that they cover every single one of those sectors in the big series of circles that you saw. But at the same time, they're granular enough that they really look in detail, because we've got these technical excellence hubs in these types of projects. So for example, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. For us, it does matter whether it's clean water or sanitation, because that would be a different team, a different group, a different series of people looking at it. So they're broad enough and granular enough. They're mainstream enough that everyone knows them. And they're sort of permanent enough that they're not going to be disappearing tomorrow. And then the best part is because they're so granular, you can map them back to any other network and language later. So we could easily map all of our projects against the SDG targets as we have done, but convert them back automatically in any of these languages or any other languages that sort of the clients are interested or we come up against. Coming back to the projects then, and that's really what I was saying here. So we target so many SDGs in our projects, and I've just added a couple, but all of our projects, I think if we added them all together, would be contributing to each one of the SDGs in different ways. So we're in a really good position here to be furthering the SDGs. The other thing was that we're using the SDGs to a really good effect on some of our projects on an individual project basis. So this is an example of a flood defence project in England, the Boston Barrier, and using the SDGs on the projects to say which SDGs are we contributing to, which aren't we contributing to, can we add them in? You know, if we're really good at one SDG, is that lessons that could be shared across the whole of the business? So connecting these projects up. So that's the measuring the universally and having that base code is really, really valuable to unite those projects together. And so that's what I was saying. So we work across so many different sectors that it's so much better if you can use the SDGs to say that I'm working, you know, on a hydropower project, which is completely separate in Pakistan, but there's an education project. But the two have a gender component. So to be able to map our projects to the SDGs, you can see that common gender component and allocate resources and share those lessons learned. The next thing is just understanding our contribution to the SDGs as a whole business. So to know what does Mott MacDonald do towards the SDGs, I think is really powerful. And then having all those businesses uniting to achieve the SDGs is much more viable once we're at that level. And then where it starts to get especially interesting, I think, is supporting those decision makers to make the decisions based on sustainability with that, you know, with the numbers and metrics and values that they need to make those concrete decisions. So we can be more strategic in selecting our projects. We can say, you know, we're really good at this SDG, let's focus on it. Or actually, there's an interlinkages between these different SDGs. Let's focus on this type of work as well. And then delivering them, you know, sharing lessons learned between different SDGs, not just in the sectors. And these kind of concept of quick wins. So my project is a flood defence project, and there's all these kind of ecological and life below water quick wins that we can add in. So if project managers haven't realized that already, by gathering these all and having this dashboard for every single project, we can then share those very easily and really kind of enhance our projects. So this is, and then I mentioned the Mott MacDonald Innovation Framework, which is particularly useful in guiding our little SDG tracker through the common pitfalls and stops. So we got the drivers on the left, and then we talked the discoverer is really setting out that very, very clear problem statement. You know exactly what you're trying to solve, and you don't try and get too ambitious too quickly. And that's where the Incubate comes in. So that's rolling out the tracker. And so we chose to roll it out just in international development first. Across every single project, let's map it. Let's see what we come up against, what works, what doesn't work. So just before I show you the tracker then, so this is some of the stuff that some of the conclusions we came to as we were mapping it. The first one was that we wanted a framework to collect the data, but it had to be kind of integrated already into our system. So it couldn't be an add-on. There's enough going on in Mott MacDonald. So integrating with an existing database that we have, where the project managers sit down and they collect the data and they write it in already. So we added the SDGs and the targets into that so that they would be automatically collected every time a new project was started. But at the same time, it's not enough to just give project managers SDGs and targets and tell them to get on with it. So we had all this training. We've got a system of what we call early career professionals. So there's a sort of more junior staff, and they were particularly interested in the Sustainable Development Goals. So training them up so that there's a uniform methodology in assessing these SDGs, because it can be quite subjective is one of the interesting things we found. So making sure everyone's approaching it in the right way. The next one is Power BI. So you'll see that in a minute. That's from Microsoft. It's a really powerful visual analysis kind of software, which really changes the way that you can analyze data. And then the next thing we looked at is we wanted a uniform metric across all of our projects, or as uniform as you can get, something that lets us compare completely different projects in completely different spheres. So we decided to try and estimate the number of beneficiaries. And that works really well on some projects. So for example, if I'm working on an irrigation project, I probably know exactly how many beneficiaries I have because I've already done the surveys. I know exactly how many farmers are working in my irrigation scheme, and how many are going to be getting more and more water. For a water supply project, for example, it's sort of a bit less straightforward, but possible. So for example, if I'm working on a water supply project and we're treating X number of litres per day, and we don't know any more information, we can say everyone uses 100 litres per day. Let's just estimate based on that how many beneficiaries we've got, so we can compare things. But then we ran into the problem of direct and indirect beneficiaries, because we said, if you've got a climate change project, you could say you have 7.8 billion beneficiaries, but it gets quite difficult then to compare that with any other project in the world. So then we said, okay, we only consider the direct beneficiaries, and these will all be shown on the tracker in a minute. But then what was again interesting is once you consider direct beneficiaries, you sometimes change the flavour of a project. So if you've got a project, for example, in health, where you're training nurses or doctors, you end up contributing directly to the SDG about decent work and economic growth. But that's not necessarily the spirit of the project, which was good health and well-being. So we then came up with this primary and secondary SDGs. And that's a really quick run through of just some of the process that we went through. But it would be really interesting if someone wants to know more, sort of collaborate about this, to send me an email later and we can talk about it in a bit more detail. So then going into the demo. I hope it works now because it was very slow earlier. So this is the dashboard, and it's hosted on our internal platform called Moata Wire. So Moata is like an internal thing that we have developed. It's very useful on projects, and it has this good geographical analysis software. Aside from that as well, we've got this platform called Wire. So we can share these Power BI dashboards and all sorts of things without the licensing issues that you would have otherwise. And those licensing issues are such a barrier to collaboration, and to be able to, use that strategic information, make the great decisions, look at the interlinkages between SDGs, everything that we wanted to do really requires us to share this data as widely as possible so that everyone can use it. So that was a welcome screen, and this is the first tab. So this is countries. So here are the countries here on the left for the projects that we're working in within international development. As I said, I'm working in Bangladesh, so I'll just click, oh no, Bangladesh, okay, I won't do that. I've got a backup plan, I'll put it on here, which seems to work better. There we go, Bangladesh will appear. So here's Bangladesh in the middle there, and then you can see here, these are the SDGs that we're working towards. So no poverty, quality education, decent work and economic growth. If you look right in the middle here, you can see that we've got 16 projects in Bangladesh. They're funded by 9 different donors. These are the number of beneficiaries. If you consider the primary SDG that I mentioned earlier, if you consider the secondary SDG, you've got this many beneficiaries. And the investment value of the donors, which is all the publicly available information that they publish, added up for Bangladesh is this. And then a bit more about, the individual projects, so the 16 projects, and which targets are they working towards. The next page is donors. So yep, the project I'm working on in Bangladesh is an Asian Development Bank funded project. So here's the Asian Development Bank. This is the projects, they're working on 18 projects. And then this is a bit more detail about which primary SDGs are they working towards and which targets are the projects that we're working towards, and which secondary SDGs are there. And so you start to see here the interlinkages between the projects that have certain primary SDGs and also have certain secondary SDGs, and that coming up over and over again is really interesting. Then again, the investment values, we've got the beneficiaries again on the top right. And this is, as I mentioned, Power BI, it's quite good visually, it's very interactive. So now if I just want to look at Asian Development Bank in Pakistan, I can do, if I want to look at India. It's a bit slow, but there it is again. And the next tab is the project by project one. So here we've got Blue Gold, another project in Bangladesh. So this is the primary SDG, it's looking at no poverty. This is a fund management program aimed to address to come up with small ideas to address poverty. And then all of the secondary SDGs we can contribute to. And then there's the SDGs tab, which is my favorite tab. And so here we've got clean water and sanitation, but you could click on any of the SDGs and say, where are we working towards SDG 6, clean water and sanitation? How much is being invested in it? Who's investing in it? Can we go back to these donors and tell them, our ideas of adding extra SDGs in there? What are the interlinkages? Can we challenge them? The other thing is, if I'm a project manager and I have been given a project on clean water and sanitation, and I'm working in South Sudan, let's say, I can look at the other projects that are there. I can see what they're working towards, what SDGs and targets are they working towards that I didn't think of. Can I work towards them? Can I share with them? Can we share resources? So that's where it gets quite interesting for the collaboration part I was mentioning. And then the final tab is on the year. So this is where the project finishes and what year and what SDGs are we working towards. And I think this tab will become only more interesting in time as we see those interlinkages between the SDGs and see how they change as we get closer to 2030. And what are the donors doing? Are they trying to hit more SDGs in one go, or they're trying to focus in on certain SDGs, and how can we influence that by showing them this data? And then so that's the dashboard. So just to come back, so just coming back quickly then to the Mott MacDonald Innovation Framework. So we're sort of this incubate to upscale stage. We plan to be a bit more in the upscale stage because we had this software which was meant to be rolled out but was a bit delayed due to the COVID situation, where we'd be collecting this data for each of our projects. But that's definitely where we want to go with this. So currently, we've got 160 or so international development projects, but there's thousands of projects about Mott MacDonald. So we're almost there, but we're not quite as far as we thought we would be. But the good thing about that is one of the things that the innovation framework talks about is this kind of gear change that you need. So what works in the incubate stage with those early adopters might not work in the upscale stage. And for us, we've got these project managers, they've got a lot on their plates already. Asking them to look through 189 different targets maybe is a big ask. So one of the things that we did is we sort of tried to scale down the targets. We narrowed them down to 75 targets, really linked to our business, exactly what we offer, exactly our sectors that you saw on the first diagram, and exactly the technical excellence hubs that we've got. And the other thing, which maybe is an opportunity now that we've got some delays in implementation, is automatically and tagging our documents and our projects with SDGs. Because we do these with our documents. We've got documents and we've got a system which has a series of words that are linked to each of our practices. So if you want to share a document, this will be auto-tagged. You don't have to do anything. And on the network, so for example, if I search for innovation in education, all of these auto-tagged documents will appear. So using that when we're doing the SDGs to have that auto-tagged, so that the project manager would just have to confirm or deny whether these auto-tagged SDGs are appropriate. So they still get the familiarity, but there's a way of just speeding up the time involved. And then that just leads into some of the things that we're hoping to get to, but do take time. So that enhanced collaboration, some of the quick wins, really looking at the interlinkages between the SDGs, and that harmonized approach and strategic thinking between projects. And thanks, that's the end of the presentation, but it'd be great to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hiba. That was a great share on behalf of Mott MacDonald. So we do have a few questions in the chat and we'll go through them first. And if anyone has any questions after that, please do write them in the chat. So the first question is, if you have, oh no, I wrote that. Are you using the UN SDGs Global Compact Action Manager?
So as I understand it from the talk yesterday, so the Action Manager is about making sure that your company is going towards the UN Global Compact 10 principles. Is that right, Cynthia? Correct me if I'm wrong. But so with Mott MacDonald, we're really delivering projects. So this is to map each of the projects that we're delivering. So the SDGs, I think, are a bit more appropriate here. I don't know personally if Mott MacDonald are using the Action Manager. There's a question I also wanted to find out.
Okay, and the next question is, how do you determine the investment value against each SDG applicable to the project you're working on?
Okay, so the investment value is for each project. For example, this project that I'm working on in Bangladesh, the flood defense project, we are doing the design of it, so we might have a certain fees, but the donor is investing a certain amount in the actual, so the design, the delivery, the construction and things like that. So that's a value that the donor's investing in this project. So we know it because we're working on the project, but it's also commonly available because all the donors will publish how much they're investing in which projects and in which countries onto their websites. And then we, in our dashboard, we can just cumulatively say, these are the projects we're working on in Bangladesh, these are all the donors, and this is their investment per project.
Richard Patterson said, fantastic tool, if only for recruitment and making people realize what we do in this place. Are our competitors doing the same? Have we asked? I think he probably works for Mott MacDonald.
Yeah, I know, Richard.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard. I haven't seen them doing it in this level of detail. I've seen a lot of strategies talking about the SDGs and how to impact on them. I've seen the SDGs used in the broader sort of 17 main SDGs, but not in the detail of the targets. And I'm not sure that they're really mapping their projects. I've not seen them do it. It'd be interesting if anyone is doing it to sort of collaborate there. And I know there's other parties, there's like One Planet who are mapping SDGs separately, and that's kind of the approach we were going for.
Do you do this for all projects or just development projects?
So at the moment, it's just international development in that incubate phase, because we just wanted to roll it out and prove the concept. But as this new software, which is slightly delayed, is rolled out, it will be collected for every single project at Mott MacDonald. So I don't know how many, but definitely thousands.
Okay, and to Caesar, yeah, we will be sharing the presentation record. The recording will be on our YouTube, which I'll send out at the end. On commercial projects, are you able to influence clients to invest in the SDGs that can be applied to the project?
Yes, I hope so, but not quite yet. So that's kind of the aim of it, and I think that takes a bit of time. We have been showing it to clients like DFID, and I think they're really interested in how we're mapping the SDGs, and that's where I want to see it going. Challenging them back and saying, you could be doing more, or do you think you should be doing it in this way? And I think that's the next step. As soon as we have enough data to show it to them, and because they're interested in it, but I don't think we've done it yet.
What are the key ways you find clients being receptive to SDGs?
Can I have a bit more detail on that one as well? Sorry, I'm not sure.
Hello?
What do you mean by key ways? I think it's really variable in terms of what our clients are interested in.
Okay, Richard Patterson, are the banks doing this? If not, we should be showing them what we have done very actively.
Yeah, and that's where we started with DFID. So as a donor to say, well, this is what we're looking at. But I think that's the next step for sure. Going back to, as I said, so the Asian Development Bank, we have plenty of projects with them. I think, yeah, especially as we get closer to that 2030, I think this is the way that things are going to start to go, isn't it? All the banks are going to start to panic that, are we going to meet them as well? And we're going to have to do something.
Sorry, my internet's cutting out a little bit. Last question from Sarah. How do you determine the number of beneficiaries for primary and secondary SDGs? Is this the responsibility of project managers?
Yes, so we've something in between. So the project manager will sit down with that sort of network of trained early career professionals. So for example, now we've rolled it out across international development. So we will have a junior with up to, maybe 7 years experience who's particularly interested in sustainable development goals. And we've trained, people in health specifically to sit down with a project manager of a health project to talk them through what are those, the secondary, indirect, direct beneficiaries. Because we've got a flow chart, we've got a whole methodology, but it's still quite a step change in thinking, and it is otherwise quite difficult to make sure that you get a common methodology. So it's a mix between the project manager, whose responsibility is to do it, and that interview with the early career professional who will really talk them through the process in detail.
Great, thank you, Hiba. If you just want to go to my slide, please.
Oh yeah, sorry, all the way back here.
I'm just going to take 5 minutes at the just to tell you a little bit more about the events that we're doing. It's great to see that we have like some of our members on the call here, and some people are also new. For those of you who aren't aware of who we are the UN Global Compact, which is a UN-supported corporate sustainability initiative. We have over 10,000 companies all over the world who have made a commitment to this 10 principles to support sustainability, along with another more than 3,500 non-businesses of all types. So that's NGOs, trade unions, and universities. Next slide, please. The very essence of the Global Compact are the 10 universal principles derived from the UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. This foundation provides a rock-solid basis for any corporate sustainability program or supplier code of conduct. They are truly universal principles. These treaties were ratified by every country around the world. Next slide, please. To join the Global Compact, and if you're not already an organization which is already a member, I would urge you to look into it. So once I send out these slides, I also send more information about the UN Global Compact. Your CEO would need to commit to these 3 things: operationalize the 10 principles, report annually on progress, and support the wider UN development agenda. Our role as an initiative is to support you in fulfilling the commitments that your CEO has made. Next slide, please. So in terms of the local network, so I'm part of the UN Global Compact Network UK, and we work as a team in which we focus on our UK members. We do events such as working groups, webinars, global impact initiatives. Here's what we have coming up in the next few months. Next slide, please. So we have our Making Global Goals Local Business webinar series. The first one is actually coming up tomorrow, so all around Goal 8, so that's on the 20th of May. And then the following one is the day after, which is more of a place-based edition for Northern Ireland on the 21st of May. And then you can see the following ones that we have. The next webinar, SDG and Innovation webinar, is coming up on the 23rd of June, and it will be featuring Refinitiv. We also have a Raising Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees. So when I send out this PowerPoint, I'll also send out the links for the rest of our events. And if you are a UN Global Compact member, we will be having our annual Leaders Summit, which will be virtual on the 15th and 16th. Last slide, please. Last slide. Hiba?
I think it's on the last slide. I'm not sure if it's an internet issue.
So on the last slide, we have a number of different programs, and we call them global impact initiatives that you could get involved in. One of the global impact
Oh dear, I think Cynthia's internet might have got lost then.
This is what happens when you use your internet all the time, and yeah, sorry, I'm back now.
Try again, Cynthia.
Thank you. Did you talk? So we have at the Young Global Compact Network UK, we have a number of different programs, and they're based around the Global Impact Initiative. So one of them is the Young SDG Innovators Program. This is a SDG Business Solutions Accelerator for young professionals in your organization. So that's anyone between the age below 35 and under. So it's a 10-month program. It's a pilot program. We've just concluded our first year, which had companies such as GSK, ERM, Hogan Lovells, Standard Life Aberdeen, as well as many others who participated, and they basically went through 10 months of creating an innovative solutions, and they also learn about what it means to innovate today. We also have our Target Gender Equality Accelerator Program, as well as our SDG Ambition Program. That concludes the event today. Thank you for everyone who were able to join, and we will be sending out the slides afterwards, as well as the recording of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiba.
Thanks, everyone.